Let's recreate this graph in R. This graph is from this article in the New York Times. So we have the data link down here, and we can follow that link to find the data that's showing up in the graph and copy it ourselves, which I have already done. You can see I have it here in my repo called sales.csv. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I'm going to save my file, make the chart.r. Always very creative. And we're going to be using tidyverse throughout this video, so I'm going to go ahead and load that up. We'll use tidyverse for data manipulation, data cleaning, and also for the plotting. All right, next let's read in the sales. And I got an error. Oh, so this repository has other projects that I've done YouTube videos for, so I need to switch into the specific folder that I'm in here. So we'll do set WD for New York Times heating unit sales. And you can see that's the name of this repository. Okay, so now let's read in the data. Boom, there we go. And we can see this is what the data looks like. We have a column for the year, a column for the type of sale that it is. And that's it. We are going to want this data in long format. It is typically easier to work with plotting, especially with something like ggplot when you have the data in long format. So let's go ahead and get cracking at that. What I want to do is I want to keep the year column and then pivot these three columns so that there's a column that designates which type of sale it is, so gas, oil, or heat pump, and then the third column will be the value. And so we can do that pretty easily with pivot longer. And the columns will be 2 through 4. And we'll say names 2 equals sales group. Or let's keep it simpler. Let's just say group. And then let's say values 2 equals sales. And we run that really quick and we can see, yes, that's showing up pretty much how we want it. If we hop back to the chart though, we see that there aren't 3 groupings, there are only 2 groupings. So we have heat pumps and we have gas and oil furnaces. So if we look here, we can see we have gas, oil, and heat pumps still. So let's create a new grouping and call it chart grouping. And we'll say if else. So just two possibilities here. Either the group equals heat pump, in which case we'll say heat pump. Or if it doesn't equal heat pump, we'll call it gas oil. And if we do that, then we see now we're down to 2 groupings, gas oil and heat pump. And finally, we want to summarize by our new grouping instead of the old grouping. So let's say group by year, chart grouping, summarize total equals sum of sales. There we go. Now every year has 2 observations, one for the gas and oil sales, one for the heat pump sales. So I think that's pretty much where we want the data. Oops. So once I get to this point, I like to work through it without assigning it to an object, but now that we're at this point, I will go ahead and assign it, and we'll just call it long sales because it is in long format. and I screwed up. What is happening here? Didn't I just run this? Why isn't... Oh. There we go. So now we have long sales. And with that, I think we can go ahead and get charting. So if I look at this graph, it's pretty simple. We're just looking at a line graph here. So I know I'm going to have a geom line element. I also see 2 points here. So that can be achieved with geom point. These labels could be achieved either with annotation, but I think using geom text and filtering the data for just this year, for 2024, would be a better way to go. And so those are the basic elements of this plot I want to bring in. Some tricky things are going to be getting this axis to show up like this, because it's not a typical ggplot axis, and then getting the fonts right, getting everything looking good. All right, so let's start with long sales and just get into ggplot. The aesthetics will be x-axis is the years, y-axis is the total sales. All right, so there we go. What we haven't done here is give it a grouping. So let's set the grouping by using a color and say color equals chart grouping. There we go. Let's make sure that looks pretty correct. And it does. That means I transcribed the data correctly as well. All right. Next thing I notice is that there's no legend on this graph, and these colors are different than the default ggplot colors. So to pull these colors, an easy way is usually, well, I shouldn't say usually, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't, but depending on how this graph or chart is added to the web page, you can just inspect the web page, click on it, and you'll find the exact hex code being used here. So I'm going to call this chart colors, and we will say that's the first variable, or that's the first argument there, 999. And then the second one is just, all right. And we can say scale color manual values equals chart calls. All right, so now we have the colors, but the colors are swapped here. So when this happens, I just usually throw in a reverse to get it how I want it. And to get rid of the legend over here, we can say theme legend position equals none. Okay. Next up, this chart is pretty spare. There's not a lot here. There's no panel background. It's all white. A lot of the panel grid has been removed. But we do have axis labels on the x-axis. We have these ticks in the axis line down here. And we have axis labels on the y-axis. So I won't go so far as to say theme void. Instead, I'll say theme minimal and use that as my starting point. And then from there, within theme, I will say panel grid minor is element blank. So that will remove both the X and Y panel grids, or minor panel grids. Oh, and something else I picked up, I'm still new to Positron, but the way this formatting works has been bugging me because it's so different from RStudio. RStudio makes it so easy. So I, tweeted about it, put it on Mastodon and all over the place. And Julia Silge, I'm not sure that's how you pronounce her name, but who works at Positron, responded, and she's on the Posit team, and told me I could use air and do auto formatting, but the way that it works is different. So it formats on save. So when I save it like this, then it's going to auto format my code, which, it's not the same as RStudio, but I think it works. So I also want panel grid major X to be a blank element, because we don't have lines going up and down here. All right, cool. See, save again, and now it's keeps updating, so that's pretty cool. Next up, let's fix this Y scale. So on the Y scale, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 million. So I'll say scale Y continuous breaks equals C 1 through 4 times 1 E6. All right, that is closer to what we want, but you can see we're missing this 1 million value. And that's actually because our data doesn't extend that far. So ggplot by default is trimming it. So I'm going to say limits equals C 500,000. And then if I set the second argument to NA, it's going to say for the upper bound, set whatever your default limit would be. All right, so now we have the axis breaks the way we want them. Now to label them, let's just say labels equals C 1, 2, 3, 4 million. Okay, one change we need to make is these are all left justified instead of right justified here. So to do that, we need to go down to theme again and say axis text Y equals element text, and we will say hjust equals 0. So now we have them left justified, but there's this big gap. And we can see there's no gap here, or a much smaller gap. So can we move it further over and go into negative values and say -1? Oops. Oh, duh. Not hjust, it should be margin. So with hjust at 0, then, okay, we're back to there. And then let's use margin to move all of this to the right with a negative margin. So the right has a negative margin of, let's say, 20. Okay, that looks pretty close. Maybe, say 25. That looks pretty close, just a little gap there, but we can see that the million here, you can see the line behind it, and that's not the case here. And the way that we can fix that is we can put a background behind each of these labels, and we can make it a white background. However, I don't know how to do that in ggplot. So I'm going to bring in another handy package called ggtext. And when you use ggtext, you can use what's called an element text box. And this will allow you to do more styling that's similar to Markdown or HTML. You can include HTML tags, which is pretty neat. So we will still set this margin, but let's run this and see. Whoops. Actually, should it be element markdown? Yeah, element markdown. Okay. But we haven't set a background yet. And for the sake of demonstration, I will set the background. Let's say fill equals red. So there we can see the fill that's happening. And I want to add a little padding around this so that it doesn't look like this line comes all the way up to that text. So I will say padding equals, and I need to use a unit argument, the unit function, in 1 millimeter. That should do it. Okay. Let's change this to white. Cool. So I think that's pretty good for the y-axis. Now let's turn to the x-axis. And the x-axis, first of all, has ticks, and it has this axis line. We currently don't have either of those, so we can add them back in. Axis ticks x equals element line. All right, we have the ticks, axis line x, element line, and now we have a line. Now it's still not showing up exactly how we want it. We want the line to end at the ticks. And what ggplot does by default is it extends the graph. So you can see the data starts here, but the graph is extended to the left, and the data ends here, and the graph is extended to the right. And so in ggplot, we call this the plot expansion. And we can adjust that in the scale x, in the x scale argument. So scale x continuous, expand equals expansion. We could say add equals c, 0, 0. So this will be left side add 0, right side add 0, I think. And that's what it did. But where did our 2020? Oh, if I go back a plot, we actually don't have 2024 because it's going in increments of 5. So we need to adjust that. Say breaks equals all right, there we go. Now we have it exactly how we want it. Next up, we need, so we can see that these are center aligned with the ticks, but this one is not. So I'm going to save that to get my formatting better. Okay. So let's look at the axis text x element text. And I'm pretty sure this is going to give me a slap on the wrist for doing something that I'm not supposed to do, but I have been doing it for years and it's really handy. So the day that they make an update that breaks this code, I'm going to be sad. But we can say hjust equals, and we want this first one to be adjusted 0 so that it's left aligned, and the rest of them we want 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. And I did not close. Oh. All right, Control C. Ooh, this has happened to me before, and I always forget for a minute what I did wrong. Oh, I need one more. There we go. So now we can see 2005 is adjusted how we want, and then there's 2010, 2015, 2020, 2024. But we can't really see 2024, can we? So maybe we need to extend this by a couple years. But that extended our line. So I think we can adjust that by saying xlim equals c, 2005, 2024. Or is it? Okay, there we go. Okay, so so we can add the margin to the right. So in that case, we don't need this. All right, so now we've added margin to the right like we have over here because we're going to need space to add this text. So that's how we can add space to the right of the plot without extending the plot that way. But first, back to this x-axis, I think these ticks need to be slightly longer and we need to add some padding. We need to move the text labels down from the ticks. So to do that, we say axis ticks length equals unit 2 millimeters. Looks good. Axis text x, let's say, let's add 10-point margin. Oh, and I just realized we need to get rid of this x label, x-axis and y-axis label. Because we can see there's no label, no title here, no title here. All right, next let's add the points. So we can say geom point. So that adds a point to every dot here. And we can see the first one and the last one are cut off a little bit. We can fix that by saying chord Cartesian clip equals off. All right, there they're not clipped, but also we only want these last two. And we're also gonna want the values from the last two with this label here. There are a few ways we could do this. We could just directly annotate this and hard code it in, but that's not a solution that could scale. I don't think it's the best solution or the most fun one. I think it's always more fun to create something in a way that can scale. You can iterate over it, you can automate it. So to do that, let's create a most recent data frame that's going to filter the data for the 2024 year. And we'll say long sales filter year equals 2024. Okay, and then geom point will say data equals most recent. And I just messed that up. All right, so now we have this limited to here. And we could do the same thing with geom text, data equals most recent. Label equals, what is that label? Oh, total. Oh, this needs to be an aesthetic. Okay. Aside from this being positioned in the wrong spot, it's also not the format we want. We want this to say 4.1 million, not the numeral. So let's go ahead and add a label variable to our most recent data frame. So we'll say mutate, and let's say short amount. And for this one, we can use label comma. Oh, I need to load. Label comma is from the scales package. So need to load scales. We can say label comma. We want it labeled to 1 decimal point, and we want it to be working on total. So then if I look at most recent, okay, it's adding the comma. Now I want to scale it by 1 e to the negative 6. I think that's what I want. Yeah. So 3.2, 4.1. That's exactly what we want here. And we want a suffix equals million. All right, perfect. Next, we need to add these labels. Now, we only have 2 categories here, so theoretically we could just use an if-else. You know, if it's one value, label it this way. If it's another value, label it another way. But again, thinking about scaling this, I would rather use a case when so that we can account for a lot of different variables as we go. So I'll call this cat label equals case when. And we'll say when the chart grouping variable equals gas, oil, we'll call it gas and oil furnaces. Gas and oil furnaces. So that's where I'm pulling that. The other one will be called heat pumps. That's when the chart grouping equals heat pump. We'll call it heat pump. And then I'll throw in this last argument, true. Any other values, I want it to be very clear that it's an error because I haven't accounted for it. All right, so this cat label is kind of an intermediate variable here because ultimately I want to create a single label that reads this, heat pumps 4.1 million. So let's call this the full label, and we'll say paste. So we'll paste the cat label because it needs to come first, and then we'll paste the short amount, this amount, because it needs to come second, and we will separate that with a new line argument because we're going to a new line. Very clever. All right, so now we need to add the full label here. Okay. Oh, and you know what I just noticed? Heat pumps is bold. Gas and oil furnaces is bold. Now we cannot, within geom text, assign bold to a specific subset of the string. We would either have to create 2 separate geoms or annotations, or we need to do something else. What I am going to do is use ggtext. When we use the ggtext package, like I said for the labels over here, you can add in some HTML formatting. So to change this text to ggtext, the geom will be called geom text box, and the data will still be most recent. It'll still be full label. And see, now it's adding a whole box here. And we can add our HTML straight to the code up here. So strong, that's going to make it bold. And instead of new line, we want to use a break. All right, there we go. We can set the width of our text box. Say width equals and you just kind of have to dial this in. There we go. All right, now we need to, let's remove the background. Say the box. Okay, the box size argument there is the border of the box, and I removed the box background. And finally, we need to adjust. So I think HJust equals 0. Yeah, that'll do it. So now we're justified to the right, and we need to add more padding. So let's say 75. All right, there we go. Now we can see the whole thing. So if we hop back over here, now I think I want to start playing with the text font family so that we have the right, so that it looks the same. Now, I mentioned in my last video, I have done some research to find a free font family, LibreFranklin. So LibreFranklin is a Google font. You can go on Google Fonts and download it. It might be hard for you to notice, but the font changed for the Axis text, but it didn't change for Geom text. And that's actually by design because Geom text, people over at ggplot have said that they want you to have to specifically designate that you want the data labeled in such a way. So we'll say family equals, and now we have that updated too. All right, so one of the last things we need to do is add our title. I will just pull that from here. We want our title to be bold. Face equals bold is how we can do that. We also want it aligned with our text over here, so I will say plot title position equals plot. All right, so we have it there. I guess it's not totally aligned here, is it? I think that's because we have this. Let's comment this out and see what that does. Oh, nope, that didn't do it. Oh, it's because the axis text Y, we have this negative margin. So if you really cared about that, we could adjust the plot title margin, and it, that gets it closer. I guess we had it 25. That's too far. These units don't always line up. I don't know, something like that's pretty close. Next up, let's add our caption, which is really simple. Now that's on the wrong side, so we want to say plot caption equals element text HJust equals 0. Move it to the left. And then we want to do the same thing that we did here. Say margin equals, oh, actually, we want to do plot caption position again equals plot. Same as for the title. And now we want to say margin equals margin left equals 12. And that'll line us up pretty close. Okay. I think we're pretty close. The last thing jumping out at me is these lines are slightly thicker. So let's head up to Geom line and say line width equals 1.5. That is too much. Too much. Say 1. That even looks a little big. So let's say 0.8. That looks pretty good. And then we need to make our Geom point bigger and add that white spacing here. And the way that you can achieve that white spacing is you can make the outline of the point. And so if you're not familiar with your Geom point shape options, you can say shape equals 21, which will be a point that you can add the interior fill and then the outer outline. So here we will say, well, let's just do that and see what happens. All right, so there you can see it's a transparent interior fill and the color is assigned to the outline. But we want to flip that and say fill equals chart grouping. And we need to do the same thing we did for scale color, except we will change this to fill. All right, so we have that, and I like aesthetic to come first. So shape equals 21. We already have the fill colored, and color will be white. All right, now that's doing what we want. We just need it a little bigger. Size equals 2. Need to add a comma. Need to get out of this. Maybe a little bigger than that. All right, that looks pretty good. Oh, heat pump is showing up. I didn't close that. So now this isn't bold also. I think this is pretty much showing what we have here. All right, I hope you enjoyed this round of Make That Chart. Copy the pros, make that chart in R. All right, copying the pros and making that chart in R. All right, I hope you enjoyed this. And there we have it. For the most part, there we have it. We have recreated this chart in R.